It's been a week, man. So looking at what's going on like in the world right now, the Israel Hamas. I want to say Hamas. I'm not going to say Palestine. I'm going to say Hamas because they're the leading faction in that territory. A lot of people get it twisted. They think it's just like, oh, a bunch of innocent. No, man. Hamas, not good people. There are a lot of really good Palestinian people, but Hamas is basically who's running things over there. So everything going on is spilled over here where you have people wrecking things and blocking roadways for in the name of Palestine, a country, a people that will throw gay people off a roof just for being gay, where Israel is probably the most tolerant of LGBTQIA 4652 people. What are you seeing going on? Where do you see that kind of evolving? There's obviously people for, people against. They say Trump and everybody's owned by the Jews. Can you give me kind of your like big picture kind of, you know, how do you take that whole situation? Like, what are you seeing as someone who's obviously commentating on this?
I wanted to thank you for addressing it as Israel versus Hamas because it's totally appropriate. That's the way it's done, and you can always tell who's like, I always say like you can tell who the bad guys are when it's a sovereign state versus a terrorist group, and they disappear the name of the terrorist group. So, for example, for a long time, I mean, you had the Saudis fighting the Houthis in Yemen. But you had a lot of people who hated the Saudis and wanted to pretend that it was, Saudi Arabia, bombing the shit out of Yemen for no reason. And you see the same thing going on with Hamas and Palestine now because it's funny going back to the Yemen example. Like for years, I would push people, or look, Hezbollah in Lebanon. Like for years, I would push people. I would say, do you really mean Lebanon? Do you really mean Yemen? Or do you mean the actual terrorist groups who are the bad guys who've swallowed up these countries? And it gets to the point, the larger regional point, which is that Iran decades ago realized that it didn't want to bother spending money in developing a legit military for a number of pretty good reasons. Namely, it's far away, and the last time they did conventional military stuff, it was with Iraq, and they lost, blah blah blah. So what they're going to do is they're going to spend most of their money not in their own military, but creating proxy terrorist armies that will swallow up the several states in the region. And they wound up taking over Iraq, taking over Lebanon, taking over Yemen. They took over Gaza, and this is how they project power. And so what we've been seeing the last whatever year and a half since October 7th, 2023, has been a war to really by Israel to push back on these different tentacles of Iranian proxies, and Iran set off the Iranians and the the Hamasniks set off October 7th because they realized this was their last shot. A week before or 2 weeks before, you had Netanyahu at the UN giving a speech about how wonderful it's going to be when Israel and Saudi Arabia make peace. And it's going to be this wonderful brotherhood, and it's going to be all this amazing tech and business and agricultural and natural resource production and all these things that will, like, no joke, benefit the world. And Iran saw that, and Hamas saw that, and it was like, well, this is our last shot. We need to get our licks in, and we need to upset this process. So that's what they tried to do with October 7th, and everything we've seen until then is just like Israel pushing back on these these proxy forces. But I think ultimately it's going to fail, as we're seeing in Yemen, as we're seeing in Gaza. Hezbollah was the senior partner out of all of them. They were the ones that got the most money. They had the most weapons. They had for 20 years they thought that they had Israel by the balls because anytime they could launch 150,000 rockets into Israel, and they turned out to be they were dispatched pretty quickly by the Israelis. So it's really, I mean, people scream about how oh my God, we may have a regional war, but no, the regional war has been here, and it looks like the good guys are going to win.
How do you
And
see the end game playing out? How do you see all of this resolving in the next 3 months, 6 months, year, 2 years?
Iran is going to take a hit, and which is fine because it's going to because it's been the problem in the region. It's going to be very bad for China, which was really hoping. I mean, the biggest benefit out of the Houthis um, uh, terrorizing the Red Sea and operating there is the Chinese. Um, and
Can you elaborate
so
on
I
that? How do the Chinese connect with all that for people that don't know?
Sure. So the right now the United States pretty much guarantees the shipping lanes in the world. And if the United States refuses to do that, somebody will do that because that's not a thing that's going to be like a total free for all. And it's going to these Chinese, and frankly, the between the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf is like the world's most important transit point for oil and natural resources and things like that everyone needs. And the people in that region, namely the Saudis, are not going to accept that area being a free for all for Iranian, um, for Iranian blackmail at any time.
I don't think a lot of
Uh,
people even knew that the Houthis were blowing up ships. I think they just think there's some type of vendetta between the Saudis and Yemen, and it's some type of a gang war, and they don't even understand that the Houthis were blowing up ships.
yeah, it's crazy, and they were doing it at look, it's really smart. It's really really smart because it costs a civilized country like 20 to 50 times as much to shoot down one of these things as it costs them to throw up in the air and to make problems in terms of drones or in terms of rockets or whatever.
And the cost of the
um
ships having to go around the Horn of Africa instead of going right there through the Suez Canal.
right, and it's responsible. I mean, it's responsible for the inflation that we're dealing with. Not to mention other things, not to mention just the fact that, like, why are we allowing this?
Yeah, I don't think
Why
anybody knows this. I didn't know half of this stuff, to be honest with you. And I consider myself pretty, looped into everything. I don't think people know what's going on in the region. And it's really frustrating. Such low information people are protesting in America for something that I don't think anybody really knows what's going on.
If I could just grab two words you just said, low information. The thing that I want to talk about this week, especially, it's like the JFK files just dropped. The KGB is mentioned over 67,000 times in those files. Israel was mentioned twice, and the JFK files prove that Israel did it.